Welcome to the AW Confidential podcast, the place where nothing is confidential, as I mentioned to today's guests. Our guests today have an impressive 40 years combined in the entertainment industry. Caroline Liem, and she will correct me if I'm saying it wrong, is a seasoned actress and Hollywood casting director for films like X-Men, Pearl Harbor, that's just to name a couple. She has worked with studios such as and networks such as the 20th Century Fox, Paramount, Warner, wow, Sony, Netflix, FX, ABC, NBC, no, ABC, Disney, CBS, Fox, and CW, and I'm sure I'm missing a few. And Grant Kretchik, and he will correct me if I'm wrong, is
You're
an
good.
associate thank you, is an associate professor of acting and theater at Pace University's Sands College of Performing Arts. He is also a department chair for BFA acting and film at Pace. Grant is also an actor. Currently, Caroline and Grant will co host the upcoming Hollywood podcast In the Podlight, a podcast that explores the post pandemic entertainment industry, its challenges faced by creatives, including issues with representation, artificial intelligence, union strikes, streaming platforms, and the always changing economics in entertainment. Now, that is a mouthful, and I literally abbreviated it. Caroline Grant, thank you so much for being here today, and congrats on the podcast.
Oh,
Hey,
thank you.
thanks.
Thank you. Thank you
Thanks
for
for
having
having
us.
Well, I am honored, first of all. Now I have to say to our community, because we had this conversation, all of us here offer perspectives. We're not experts in any one thing. By far, we're not experts. But we do share perspectives, and Grant and Caroline are champions of representation, which I, as a Latino, appreciate. I mean, this is a huge topic, it's a hot topic, and it's something that we need to talk about. But we won't only be talking about that today because I have a few questions and I try to get a real mix, just to get your perspectives on different topics. So, you have a combined 40 years of experience in the industry. And I imagine that you've had your share of changes throughout the careers that you've seen. I mean, just to name, I know the ones that I can, you know, name right now. In 2019, we experienced the pandemic, which we were all affected by. And then in 2023, there was an industry strike that involved writers, actors, staff, and audiences. I mean, everyone was affected by this strike. So I was curious, in your opinion, what outside of better wages for working actors, which, by the way, I had the incredible opportunity of interviewing some working actors. I didn't, I really didn't understand, and it sounds crazy, right? The concept of a working actor. I figured you work in Hollywood, you make money. And it's just and I think a lot of us just think that way, but that's not true at all. Some of them don't even some don't even have insurance, which is insane. So what was, in your opinion, the greatest change that resulted from this event? And that is impactful, but from your perspective, what would be, a change that was really just kind of impactful and that you
Yeah.
saw on your end?
Yeah, I'll start. Look, talent not actors not being able to make the threshold for their medical insurance, that's a hardship across the board that is continuing now, yesterday, continuing forward. There are many positive things that came out, or contract gains that I guess came out of this. And I would say one of many, is to reward performers for successful made for streaming titles. That's, so all of the streaming, we know about we were all, we all stopped. And so what did we go to? We were streaming, right? And the actors were not getting any residuals off of that. And so at least there's some bonuses coming through for that. Things have been earmarked, to I don't know the numbers, so I wish I could be a little bit more specific about percentages and numbers, but I know that there are rewards coming to performers that should have been there all along.
We
Caroline,
heard the stories.
Yeah.
Caroline took mine. I was going to say to the streaming bonus, and
All 5 cents of it.
I know, but and you're right, Caroline, right? They fell a little short on what they went in for, but that's negotiations, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's how you look at stuff or how you frame stuff. So, I don't think there's anybody out there feeling like they got what they wanted out of the AI negotiations, but what happened, what did occur is that the AI has been entered into a really meaningful conversation, and the contract will be renegotiated in 2026, right? So that's around the corner, and we're actually going to have a lot more information on AI and how it's being used. So I feel like just having it at the forefront of the conversation sort of blew that up, not just for the entertainment industry, but it gave AI and its complexities and its challenges a much larger platform beyond just entertainment. So for now, you have to sign some meaningful, substantive, agreement about how they use your image. It's not exactly where anybody set out, but I think like anything, um, you've got to take the stepping stones across the river to get to the other side. And so, let's get on that stepping stone, and let's start building the next stepping stone for the negotiations in 2026.
Absolutely. Now, I'm glad you brought up AI before I did. And it's hard it's hard to have this conversation without bringing it up because it is real, it is coming, it's not going anywhere. Um so what as far as we're seeing, producers, writers, we're seeing a little bit of AI, artificial intelligence, trickle into Hollywood, into our daily lives, chat gbt. I mean, we're all using, or not all, but we're a lot of us are using it, and it's even being used in corporate offices. So we're seeing it sort of filter into every part of our lives, like you said, the whole thing with the images, which is really scary. So how, in we all have a different perspective, right? And there are pros and cons to everything. So I wonder, how can, in your opinion, AI help or hurt the industry long term? What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Mm, it's so scary.
Technology is, I
I mean,
know, I
I don't know if
know.
I'm too old, Caroline, if you want to jump in here and because you have strong feelings, but it scares me. It's really scary. And we've been exposed to AI, I think maybe even before we knew it, right? Like Paul Walker and
Mm,
Carrie Fisher, they finished those films um,
yeah.
and built their persona around that actor so they could finish the film, right? So that's sort of, I guess, in some ways, an interesting thing.
Mm.
I guess it could be interesting if you didn't have to go back to set, if you didn't have to do pickups, because they could, sort of round out some of that post through AI, except for you better be paid for it because it's still your image, right? So
So
it's a catch
there's a
20.
lot of layers there.
There's a lot of layers in how it could be used and manipulated. I was reading that there's some AI actor coaching going on. These things really,
Wow.
it's
It's
it's such a
opening
human
people.
world. It's such a human expression, and I don't think I'm maybe idealistic, but look at the way we pursue celebrity, the way we desire to be in the same arena with Taylor Swift or Beyonce, because that is a human collective shared experience. If you replace an actor or create an actor entirely, right? So not even just manipulating an actor post-production, but if you create an entirely new actor, what's the fallout of that sort of shared experience of, the novelty of the theatrics of watching them walk the red carpet or accept an award or give a speech at a convention, a
You
political.
you miss out on that human connection too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I wanted to mention is that, you know, we talk about replication. What it cannot replicate is emotional depth and cultural nuance. We're talking about culture today. It cannot replicate original storytelling. And I don't think it can, at least in the world, in the way we know it now, highlight your unique voice and your unique perspective and distinguish your work from, and talking about writers now, AI generated work or content. So for now, I think there's still humanity in this that cannot be replicated. And
I
that's
think we
what's
have to,
the hard part.
yeah. And I think we have to fight for it. Um, you know,
There, well, there, I would think it, and it's funny because now that you're bringing this up, there are so many other layers to this. We're talking legal, we're talking financial. I mean, this is uncharted territory. So I think there are a lot of layers of not just complication, but there's going to have to be negotiation. There's going to have to be new experts that come in and educate. And I mean, it's a whole different realm.
Oh, for
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
the world is moving fast, and it's really hard for us, I think, to move as quickly as the world is moving, and that's creating a lot of frustration and anxieties, and then that's just exacerbating, I think, this sort of fever pitched dialogue around, not just AI, but really emotionally driven conversations around the dinner table, around culture, around gender, identity, just identity. And so we have to take a breath. And I think Obama said it the other night in his speech, we need a little bit of patience because the world is moving fast, and some
Mm.
some folks are not going to move as fast as the world. And so we got to be generous with our neighbor and our grandparents and our great uncle who need some time to catch up to where we're going, to where
I
this
mean,
journey we're on.
and I'm glad you said that. I think two thoughts to add to that: human beings are not the most patient, and I think, the second one would be, you're right. We should give time and allow space for others to catch up, but we're even having, and I'm not going to get political. That is not my thing,
That was not
but
my
I
intention either.
but I have to say that even our laws have not caught up. So I really, it is a concern. And it's going to take, I'm not even sure it's years. It might take decades,
Yeah.
Mm,
if we're lucky, decades.
Yeah. And
So
it's good, some of it's really good. One of the questions that you sort of hinted at asking was some of the changes that we've seen, so much is, Me Too was a big movement, right? You talked about the pandemic and you talked about the negotiations in 2023, but there's these big cultural shifts. Me Too, George Floyd, right? There's these massive cultural movements that occur. And it can swing one way or another, right? Like we can get into some really tough space with cancel culture, but then what we can also do is get into some really positive space where we're starting to really embrace intimacy coordination and safe spaces for actors' boundaries, so that they have agency over their bodies when they're working, and so you know, there's going to be good and there's going to be bad, and we're not always going to agree with everything. But similar to what we were just saying about catching up, I do think, you know, it's taken as an actor trainer. For years, we've only, I don't know how you feel, Caroline, we've only taught what we learned. And that is, you know, that's the same as generational trauma, right? It's been trickled down for generations of actor teachers, and it's going to take us time to relearn how to train differently, how to train better, how to train healthier, because it can be such an emotionally, physically, traumatically abusive and celebrated space when you go into those dark places. And so sort of part of our responsibility is to take the time to re-educate ourselves so we can stop some of the generational um, passing on of the bad stuff that we were taught. And that's not accusing anybody of anything. It's just what we knew. It's what they knew. It's what their mentors knew.
Yeah, it was what was culturally okay, you know, in that
Yeah,
time period,
that's
and we all move forward, and we have to.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I have to mention this because Grant did talked about the cultural piece. You are both champions of representation. I am a Latina and I celebrate that. I appreciate that. And, you know, I cannot let you um let you slide without asking you a question about it. So, according to a McKinsey report, Latinos are underrepresented in Hollywood on and off screen. We account for more than 3 trillion of the GDP, but we're responsible for 24% of streaming subscriptions and box office ticket sales. But Latino performers make up 4% of lead and co-lead roles in US films and only take about 5% of executive seats. As champions of representation, and I know you both, you know, discuss it and you're very passionate about it. I wanted to know, you know, how do you feel about these numbers? And, you know, is there anything, of course, from your perspective that can be done, maybe more of, or maybe some sort of shift that you can um, maybe share that, you know, could improve these numbers? Have Is this a conversation that you're willing to, you know, take a crack at?
This is so big.
I know, but I can't let you go without asking.
I'm gonna throw some things out there because as an Asian, I understand what this is, you know, to let's just go there, the stereotypes and being seen a certain way, and being heard a certain way, and that's the only box that, you know, you get to fit into, right? And that is not true. That's not a truth. That's not a true statement. It's a truth in somebody's mind, and that would be a top-down situation. I'm jumping all over the place because like my mind goes into 20 places right now. So let me get focused here. So let me see. To be limited to playing particular roles which restrict opportunity to instead play human characters with real, beautiful, complex stories is a typecasting that I believe reduces anyone. We're talking Latino Latinx, but it reduces everyone from really embracing and learning from different people's experiences. I'm gonna start crying. So Hollywood, traditional Hollywood has, you know, historically been dominated by narratives that are predominantly white, Anglo-centric, you know, and ignoring the experience and perspectives of many other underrepresented communities. And here we're talking about Latino. What do we do about that? So lots of things. Obviously, one, increased visibility of Latino narratives, right? These stories need to be told and to be told in their perspective. And support, again, top down. So now we're talking writer rooms. So what about the Latino writers, the directors, the producers, those who create content that reflect the experience is crucial. Of course, C-suite, let's get him in the C-suite. We got it. And that comes from mentorship, that comes from development, that comes from, and not just pat on the head or good job mentorship. That is really in it for the long haul. And
Cultivate.
really, go ahead.
No, I meant cultivate. You have to cultivate a different environment, a different mindset. It encompasses, it's a whole. It's not just
Yeah,
one or two things.
it is guidance and resources and networking experiences, and it's literally, maybe it is holding one's hand as you're navigating the industry, and it's you know, and it's helping in collaboration, you know, these groups, Latino groups, any underrepresented group, any of these groups really secure influential roles, whether that's, you know, corporate, whether it's production, whether it's creative, in front of the camera, behind the camera. That's, I'll hold there, Grant.
Oh gosh, Caroline.
Go on for
Okay.
like the next
As I
And
was
hour.
thank you.
listening,
I didn't know you.
no, as I was listening to you, I was like, I have so much I want to say, right? Like, so I'm a cis white gay man, and in some ways it feels like, we're doing really well and we've come really far. And I recognize 100% that I've had many opportunities that have been afforded to me simply because I'm white and friendly. And that if I were something else, some of those opportunities may not have been given to me in the same way. But I'm also constantly conscious of when I leave my bubble in New York or Los Angeles, and I find myself in other bubbles, how reduced I feel sometimes because of my sexuality, right?
That
Because of
makes me
who I
cry, love.
love, and it's humbling to sometimes get out of that space and be reminded that there are people out there who don't understand you. And so then that lack of understanding becomes vital. It becomes so critical in the room, in authenticity, in terms of telling stories. And it becomes really important that who you collaborate with, right? Like, so if you've got a really great Latino story, we'll go with Latino story or Latinx story, because that's what you introduced. You can't just have one Latinx writer in the room or one Latino writer in the room. Who is the coalition of diverse representation in the space, not just the writer's room, but behind the camera, who's directing, and it doesn't mean that we can't all help tell each other's stories, but we have to have authenticity there to make sure that we're telling it accurately from the lived experiences of these people. We have one guest, and I won't tell you who it was, but because you'll hopefully listen and you'll find out. We have one guest. She said, I was being directed by a white man, and I said, she said, I really felt like a woman of color at this age wouldn't do this. And he said to her, I think she would.
Wow.
And she knew, because she knows, because that's that's what you live, that's who you are, it's how you breathe. Just to this point, it's like we've been making mistakes for a long time. We've sort of been failing up as a country, as an industry, and I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that I know that I have made mistakes.
We
I know
all have.
that I have shifted the way I teach, the way I approach things that I would say yes to from when I was 20 because I was hungry and I thought I had to say yes, to where I am now. And I think it's so important that we give each other the space and the opportunity to sort of move through that, to learn from our mistakes, to take accountability, and to sort of say, like, no, we can make these mistakes and we can still pull each other along. You can pull me along when I make a mistake, and I can pull you along when we make a mistake or we evolve, right? It's so important that this is seen as a fluid thing and not as a stagnant, it must be this is the rubber stamp. I don't know. Now I'm lost, Caroline, because I was like
No,
just cherry
I
picking
no.
things that
I
you
want
were
to jump
saying,
in.
and I was like, I want to
I
respond so much to
I
I
all
want
of it.
know it's a loaded topic, right? And
that.
it's something that I ask because I just feel, Caroline, you're both actors. You are a casting director in
Mhm.
Hollywood, and Grant, you do the theater and you do the films and you're in it and you teach, which is incredibly important because you're passing the baton to, you know, the next group, the next generation. And I just felt I had to ask. And I
Yeah.
know that we're not going to, come up with a solution
Yeah.
in, these 30 minutes, but it's important to hear, what everyone else is thinking. Because I'm Latina. So I have a certain perspective. I have the perspective from from on the other side. So I think it's important to have these conversations and be honest and open about them because that's the only way to create change.
Yeah.
What
We
I
shouldn't be afraid
have,
to talk about it. We're so afraid to talk about
yeah,
the things that divide us or the things that can
Right.
become emotional. We have to talk about
right.
it. And if that in that means we have to be able to give each other space to say something dumb, to say the wrong
Absolutely.
thing. Now, if that comes from a very different place, then
Not mean spirited.
but you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it's how we grow.
I know.
You said something
Absolutely.
about the teaching, which is so important. And I just want to say that I think that Caroline and I both entered this podcast understanding that we have access to a sort of next generation of gatekeepers. And to answer your question about, how do we change those numbers in terms of executives and stories that are told and things like that? And I think we change it by seeing representation, by seeing belonging, and by, highlighting stories that you're trying to highlight or that we're trying to highlight on our podcast, because we want to say to our students and our young actors or directors or aspiring executives, whatever it is, like, there's room at the table, there's space at the table, and you deserve to be there. So don't tell yourself no before anybody else tells you no, right?
And
Like,
even if they say no, you keep pushing. You keep knocking on
you bring
those
your own
doors.
damn seat. Yes.
I wanted to add that one of the outcomes that I'm hearing about from the strikes has to do with this, is that we want these stories, and that we, not we, me, the almighty we in the industry, that they are seeking stories, they are seeking voices that are truthful to the experiences, and they're creating space for it, which they weren't doing as much before. So just that there is movement around it, that there are positive things happening with it.
Well, I will then leave it at that positive note because we love positive. So we spoke a little bit, not even spoke, we touched on streaming platforms, especially the pandemic. It just became a whole different monster. We've literally become our lifeline for entertainment. I know that a couple of years ago I canceled my cable. I only live on streaming. And I remember before I canceled it, I asked some younger people in the office. I said, do you guys have cable? There was not one I was the only person still with cable. I said, okay, maybe this is the right way to go. But we use streaming platforms for our films, for our series, for our reality TV, which is a thing, um, documentaries, and even wellness. I mean, we're seeing more and more of, mental health topics, and it's it's something that we've come to rely on: the Apple TV, the Paramount, Netflix, Prime Video, Disney, and all those other platforms. So as we move into this modern world, and we become, and I think it's already happening, we're having this more mobile lifestyle, and we're seeing the advantages, but I truly believe there's pros and cons to everything. What challenges do you foresee, if any, in the future as we move? I think 100% at some point it'll be streaming, because no one wants to pay that much for cable. Although I have noticed that by the time you add up all the different streaming platforms, it's not very cheap, is it?
It is not. I wish they'd start. I mean, they are starting to do bundle packages, but yeah, I don't have cable, and I'm like, I just want to watch this one damn show. So now I can. Don't get me started.
Exactly.
I do not have cable. I stream, but what I find, it's a little bit like when you go to the refrigerator and you keep going back to the refrigerator and you're hoping you'll see something different, and it's the same old stuff, and you're like, do I order in? And then I think there's a fatigue around that, which I think could be a challenge with the streaming situation, because part of it is, if streaming is where it's going and where it is, I mean, let's be real. There's, where are they getting their content from? We've just gone through a pandemic and a load of strikes. Now, where are they going to get their content from? So they're going overseas, right? So they're opening it up, right? And who knows how they're framing what that's going to be, and what they purchase, and then they bring it to the consumer. And I mean, I see all kinds of fatigue around that, and just
oh, interesting. Okay.
So I
maybe
see.
backlash. I don't know, maybe.
What do you think, Grant? You think you're right, because, well, it's like too many options sometimes. Like, do I watch? I literally have, I want to say maybe 5 streaming services. I'm like, okay. And there's tons of, it's a carousel for each one. So I don't know, Grant, what do you think?
Well, I have a sort of tendency to see always, like, I'm like, that's a good thing. And I'm like, but actually it's not. Or it's like, that's a bad thing, but actually that could be kind of good. I think for me, I think we're already seeing this with like news. You can go pick and choose what you want, right? So you can watch the thing that makes you feel comfortable, right? And so you used to thumb through the New York Times, and you might stumble on an article that makes you think differently, or that it offers you a perspective that you might not see. Now you just go to the news source that like makes you feel like that thing that you think is absolutely correct, right? And so I think that there's a danger in being able to sort of cherry pick your television shows sometimes too, because what if you're watching a great television show and all of a sudden an amazing transgendered storyline pops up, and that causes you to be exposed to that, or a great LGBTQ queer story. Again, trans story is also a queer story, right? Like opens up and makes you think, and makes you, like, people will disagree with this, but I really give Will and Grace a lot of credit for making American comfortable with. Now, there were a lot of tropes in that. Fine. I mean, others will say not fine. I'm fine. But, it introduced middle America and large parts of the world to this, and made it normal, right? So Caroline's talking about going internationally. One of the things that I love about streaming, though, is that I actually picked up a lot of Spanish television during the pandemic.
Yes,
we all picked up a lot of Korean television during the pandemic, right? And so that's also really exciting, because that's something I didn't know how to have access to when I only had cable. right?
That's a
So
good
like
point.
it's this. I think you have to be intentional with what you're doing. I think you have to know what you're doing. So, and oh God, I don't know. I don't know. You know, I don't want to give up my Spanish television or Korean dramas for anything. So I'm really
I
grateful
love
to
I
for
love
You
that.
should
that
chill.
I love that I love
Chill.
that word though, intention. I think you bring up a good point. It's all about intention. I mean, you can use anything as a weapon, right? You can use anything as a distraction, but I think if you know how to use these tools, I think they can be for good. They can also harm. That I mean, look at our addiction to social media, to phones. I-
The reality television, which you
So I think actually that's a really good point. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah.
Hey, Love Island is like I
Ah,
mean, I know it sounds horrible, but wait. I know I'm an intellectual, but I have to tell you, sometimes I need to shut it off because I can't watch news all day. I cannot do it. So
No.
I just need to shut it off. And when you see things like Love Island or The Housewives, it's like, okay, the everything shuts off and it's just like you're in the moment.
So I have
So
strong.
see, even that can
It
be
is
good.
so good and so important. I have strong opinions about the Housewives. Um, no,
Oh,
well,
you
so I have
you're
so
gonna have to
I have a
dish.
strong theory that
What?
like the first reality television
Okay.
was the O.J. Simpson trial. Right.
mm,
So then like that sort of gave
Ooh.
that started 24-hour news cycle. It started it started sort of reality TV, right? And then we started to figure out how to monetize it. Talk about losing actors' jobs, right? We started putting this content on primetime television, this reality stuff. Now listen, it created all kinds of other jobs. I have a good friend who edits Love Island, so you know, good for that show and excellent and good for him. So there's a lot of jobs out there. But I also think in these
I
sort
just
of
got excited.
fight I get really excited about this, and I have friends who love Housewives and hate my opinion on this. I really think that it helps
Uh-oh.
normalize the vitriol that we have all gotten so comfortable at hurling at each other and making it really normalizing just the nastiness of how you shouldn't talk to each other. And I
mm,
think
Mhm.
what it ultimately passes on is a sense that that's not only okay, but it's celebrated.
mm.
But do you think it's really okay and celebrated? Because I just saw the end of the New Jersey Housewives and I was extremely disappointed. I'm as a woman, I just couldn't I just couldn't
Well, then
believe
there's
it.
that
I
too,
couldn't
right?
it was
Do I think that? No. But I worry what kind of standard it sets.
okay. Wow. I didn't think this could be so deep, but this is
That's
I
what
don't know.
worries
I
me
just
about it, right? I mean, now listen, there's some funny
no, but
lines. Like I forget which one it
true
is where
though.
she's like, your lips look
Well,
like
I
a
don't
monkey's
know.
asshole. Can I say asshole on this?
Have you you can say whatever you want. We're all
Okay.
adults.
There's that
But
line
even the
that she says,
flipping the tables.
I mean, it's
I
craziness. And
mean,
then people think
yeah,
we should
it's
behave like that in public. Look around us at what's happening.
true.
And I actually think there's a direct correlation that nobody will be able to prove that who is a reality television star? You're fired.
Ugh.
That this kind of
Oh,
stuff
oh God.
helps to elect
Oh.
government
Well,
officials.
there's truth out there for that.
That absolutely contributes to the sort of what's her name from
Oh.
what's her face, Taylor Greene and Bobart and Trump himself, who's actually a reality television star. You know, and I don't mean to put anybody down who people vote for all kinds of reasons, but I do worry that that kind of stuff can play to the lowest common denominator in us.
Oh, that was powerful. Thank you. Wow.
Sorry, I got really passionate, and it's just people are going to
No,
find me on
that
social
no,
media
that
and send
no,
me. I'm
it
going private again.
no. It really did hit differently because you're right. It can't bring out the worst.
Yeah.
Oof. Well,
Okay,
AW,
sorry.
no, AW likes to end interviews with positivity and hope. And between you two, you have decades of stories between you. And we're living in a time, as we've talked about, of uncertainty and much is unknown. This is 2024. That's all I have to say. Can each of you share a positive change post pandemic, post strike that indicates that it's not all bad news and that we are going in the right direction? Positivity. Come on, Grant. I know you have it.
Oh, have I been negative? Oh God.
No, you have it. You've actually been very realistic and frank, which is something that we love. Right, Caroline?
Absolutely. I'm thinking.
Yeah. I mean, I
There's
do actually. Go ahead, Caroline.
No, I'm not ready to go.
Okay, great. Thanks, Caroline. Um, I do think there's a lot of positivity, right? I mean, I think we're still um, adjusting, right? Like there are students that couldn't go to prom. There are students that, there's a small group of people out there that have gone through a period in their lives where they don't know how to relate to each other physically or emotionally because of the pandemic, right? And I think we're getting through some of that. I think we are getting joy back. Um, I feel it. The teaching the first couple of years right out of the pandemic, 2021, 2022, was tough. This past year, I really felt like there's joy again. I think what gives me hope really are conversations around like how we are really embracing, intimacy coordinators, how we are embracing cultural consultants, conversations like this. You don't know who they reach. You don't know the impact that they have. Sometimes you worry it's falling on deaf ears, but that doesn't stop us from talking, right? And I do think that we're inundated with the 24-hour news cycle of a lot of negativity. I mean, there's climate anxiety, there's guns anxiety, there's all kinds of horrible things that we're inundated with. And I think that we just have to continue to come to each other and talk through it. And so these conversations and things that we're putting in place to make it a safer, better place for us to explore, that gives me hope.
I love that.
Mm,
Caroline.
There's so many. We Grant and I in the podcast, we talk a lot about belonging and about being in the rooms and having, what that room means, for those who are distant from it, and for those who gain entry, and for those who want to, right? And that every room there should be belonging. Belonging it's the center of everything. It's I mean, in my mind.
Yeah.
But I'm rambling because I'm trying to still form the positive. So I
Well,
think I have an idea though. I think the industry really, whether you see it on the everyday or not, I really think there is a conscious effort being made to amplify underrepresented voices, both in front of and behind the camera. And it's trickling down because we're having this conversation today. It's trickling down because we're having these conversations in our universities, in our colleges, in our clubs, in all of our organizations, um, in a really active, beautiful way. And I think what's happening is it's not creating, it's just allowing greater representation, um, whether it's in the world of people of all kinds of backgrounds, LGBTQIA plus, disabled communities, mainstream media. It's all coming. It's creating more visibility in a way that the conversation is easier
hmm,
because it's being heard and it's actually being not only heard, but listened to and active. Is it perfect? No. Do we have a long way to go? Heck yeah. But these conversations are happening and there is movement, and that for me is very positive.
I love that. Movement is good. Movement is good. So, one of the things that I have been doing with my guests is at the end, I surprise them with I have a little game of We Connect, and I randomly choose a card that you will answer, and I will just pick a card and see what the question is. Okay.
Oh boy.
Part of yourself would you like to improve? Interesting.
Does it define if it's a physical self or a spiritual self, or does it matter?
I'll leave it open. I was going to say not physical because that's too easy.
Yeah. I don't know. I think we're all works in progress, right? I was just recently talking about parts of myself that I thought I had to ignore or lie about when I was, a teenager or 20 something, sort of realizing, as that those things are actually your story. Those things are actually like your identity. They're what make you who you are, and that your insecurities and your vulnerabilities are your strengths. And so, I hope that I would like to improve my patience. We talked a little bit in this conversation about time and giving space and time. I do like to move things. I do like to get things done, and I realize that that can't always happen on my timeline. So I think I'd like to continue to try to improve my patience and
I'm
I
in
guess
that club.
yeah, and I want to be better about finding grace for those whose views really offend or challenge mine.
Oof, that is a good one.
Oof.
All right.
That's
That
a
was
really
good.
good one.
I can't say I'm going to win that, but
Thanks, Grant. Well, see, you're reading my mind right now. That energy, yeah, I don't know, but hey, we can try.
space anyway. Maybe not grace, but space.
I like that better. A lot of space for me. Caroline,
Yvette, may I hear the question again?
of course.
Caroline's
What
also
part?
serious.
What? What? And I'm not even drinking wine. What part of yourself would you like to improve?
It's around mindfulness. That's all that's coming to me right now. Because there's things like I wish I could see clearer, because like my eyes are so blurry and they water all the time, and I wish I could just see. But I think there's something about mindfulness and being present to the moment. Best efforts for that. I don't always give myself grace for that.
That's a great one. I think we can all do some of that. Thank you so much.
Wow.
Both of you for entertaining that. I have been surprising guests and they love it. So thank you. I want to make sure that you share with us how we can find you.
Podlight can
in
be
the Podlight.
found at our website in the Podlight. The episodes will be there, but they're also streaming on sort of all the major platforms under Sans Talks, which is Sans College of Performing Arts podcast platform. And that's Sans Talks. And then there's a thing there for and the trailer is already up. And then you can find me only if there's love and joy at Grante's Inferno. That's my Instagram handle, and I don't really use Facebook anymore.
Oh, I have to look that up. I don't
And my
think
Instagram handle is
I don't know.
it's Caroline Liem.
I will have to look that up.
If you find one of us, you'll find both of us.
Yeah.
See, Grant. That sounds good. Thank you so much. Congratulations on the podcast. And
Thank you, Jen.
I will be speaking to you again sometime soon, I'm sure. Thank you guys. And thank you, Luz, for joining us. Insightful episode of AW Confidential. Talk to you soon.